Said it before and I'll say it again. US Vice President J.D. Vance was right when he said this earlier this year.
And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat.
And now, in light of yesterday's brutal rejection of Lucy Connolly's appeal of her 31-month sentence, I don't know about you, I found that absolutely outrageous. Even Boris Johnson has warned that the UK is now fast becoming a police state. And today I wanted to explain why I think this is no exaggeration. There's no denying that Southport was a watershed moment in the history of our country. Not only did we see the likes of Lucy Connolly being handed prison sentences for things that they wrote on social media in the privacy of their own home, being given prison sentences longer even than some members of the Pakistani Muslim rape gangs, but we even saw the national newspaper columnist Alison Pearson being paid a visit by the police and having a non-crime hate incident recorded against her, not to mention those two parents who were arrested by 6 police officers after complaining about their local school in a WhatsApp group. Indeed, this revelation has opened up an entire scandal. One analysis has shown that the 43 police forces in England and Wales have between them recorded more than 133,000 of these non-crime hate incidents since they were introduced in 2014. And just a reminder, those are things where if you perceive somebody to be offensive, you can have one of these non-crime hate incidents recorded against them despite not having to provide any evidence. But the threat to free speech doesn't end with those Orwellian measures. The Labour government, as I've warned before, is currently working on a crude and tight definition of Islamophobia that could also pose a serious threat to free speech. Indeed, an earlier iteration of that definition specifically mentioned talking about the rape gangs as an example of Islamophobia. Just to give you some kind of idea about how this Labour government feels about free speech, remember, one of the first things it did upon entering power was to try and stop the previous government's free speech law for our universities. Now, the real question, of course, is in what kind of country does this make any sense at all? In what kind of country is a mother and wife like Lucy Connolly put in prison for nearly 3 years? The answer is a country that has completely lost its way, that has forgotten that its foundations are free speech, free expression, and individual liberty. At least those are the things that I associate with these islands. Now, there may come a point where we have to rely even on America to keep the pressure on this government to maintain the principle of free speech. Here's a reminder of what Charlie Kirk, the prominent American commentator, said exclusively on GBNews about this very issue last night. Just watch this.
I'm going to try to get the U.S. State Department involved. I don't know if, what their bandwidth is here, but I'm sorry, again, I'm speaking as a citizen, not as a U.S. government. I just want to be very clear. Is this a way that a liberal democracy and an ally of the United States acts?
Have you been getting a load of spam in your email recently? What about random calls? It's really annoying, isn't it? Data brokers are out there collecting your personal information. Anything from your email, your full name, your address, and even your political affiliation. Cyber criminals can even use AI to mimic the voices of friends and family to trick people into sending them money. And it gets even worse. People out there are getting huge loans taken out in their names without even knowing about it. But don't worry, because the sponsor of this video, Incogn, can help. They reach out to the data brokers on your behalf and request that your information is removed from their databases. Incogn continues to make sure that your data is removed automatically from the internet via repeated removal requests. So, how can you get started? Well, step 1, hit the link in the description, create an Incogn account and tell us whose data you'd like removed. Step 2, grant Incogn the right to work on your behalf. Step 3, sit back, relax and watch Incogn work. They will update consistently so you know when your data has been removed. Incogn is risk-free for 30 days, so you can try it for yourself and you'll get a free refund if the service isn't for you. So take back your personal data today with Incogn. Use the code GBNews using the link in the description below and you'll get 60% off an annual payment plan.
Is this a liberal, free democracy? Asked Charlie Kirk. Well, to discuss this, I'm joined now by the chief political writer at Spike, Brendan ONeal, one of my favourite writers on these issues and a friend of the channel and the show. Brendan, thank you for joining us. I mean, how is Boris Johnson going too far when he describes Britain as turning into a police state? And does Charlie Kirk actually have a point when he asks a question from across the pond? Are we actually still a liberal, free democracy?
No, I don't think Boris is going too far. We are becoming a police state. We are becoming a tyrannical country. You know, the government is behaving like the Stasi used to behave in East Germany in the 1970s and the 1980s, by which I mean it's listening in on people's conversations, it's spying on what they say online or to each other, and it's arresting people for what they say, and it's imprisoning people for what they say. When you put someone in jail for 31 months for something they wrote in the heat of the moment and later deleted, that is the act of a tyrannical government. There is no question.
I mean, the Lucy Connolly case I found particularly chilling, not only because of the length of the sentence, not only because she's had her appeal denied, not only because she had a request for temporary leave to see her 12-year-old daughter denied, but the fact that the judge also did not take into account the fact that she had only a short while before the Southport atrocities lost her own child and therefore struggled to process the atrocities and those mitigating factors that we saw the Sentencing Council falling over itself to point to when it comes to racial, sexual and gender minorities seemingly didn't count in the case of Lucy Connolly.
The thing that's striking about the Lucy Connolly case is that it's not only extremely authoritarian, but it is also just cruel. You know, the modern era, we're supposed to have moved on from cruel and unusual punishments for crimes. You're not supposed to do that anymore. This is a cruel and unusual punishment that has been inflicted on this woman for something she said, for words that she expressed, for an idea she expressed, which we can all agree it was not a very nice idea, of course, but it was words. It's cruel and unusual in the sense that the sentence is so long. Her appeal has been brutally rejected. She hasn't been allowed to come out to see her daughter. This is a punishment of an extraordinary variety. And if you look at what the judge said during the case, he was making political points. He was talking about the virtue of diversity and why modern Britain's diversity is so important. So this is like, it feels like she's a political prisoner, that she's been punished not just for committing a crime, but for going against the political grain. And modern liberal democracies are not supposed to do that.
What's the way back here for this country, Brendan? I mean, you look at the things that are going on with this Labour government and just how authoritarian it is. It's called to expand the use of non-crime hate incidents, as we've discussed. It's rapidly expanding these terms like Islamophobia. Keir Starmer's favourite concept, of course, being far right, trying to expand the use of that to stigmatise opposition to things like mass migration. There is a war of words, is there not, going on in this country that is being used to, in subtle but powerful ways, try and control the parameters of the national conversation?
That's exactly what's happening. They are policing the parameters of acceptable thought. And if you step outside of them, or if you say something they find unacceptable, they will punish you. And they use words like phobia, Islamophobia or transphobia to curtail what people can think and what people can say, and to demonize us if we say the wrong things. But, you know, there's also, as you will be aware, Matt, there's the two-tier problem. Let's not forget when that gang of men drove through Finchley Road in North London, shouting out, "Bring out your Jewish daughters, we will rape them." Or when an imam, 2 weeks after 7th of October, an imam in Redbridge gave a sermon in which he said, "Ruin the Jews' houses, destroy the Jews' homes." No charges was brought in either of those cases. And yet Lucy Connolly is rotting in a jail cell for something she wrote online about immigrant hotels. So we have a severe problem of a two-tier morality system, and chipping away at that is going to be the first step, I think, to getting back to normalcy.
Yeah, now we're also potentially on the cusp of quite a dramatic political change in this country. Look at the polling this week, and we're going to come on to this later in the show. We are seeing something pretty historic. It could be that this country is on the cusp of an entirely new government after the next election that of the kind we've not seen before. What would you be advising a future government, perhaps outside of the establishment, to do when it comes to this issue of free speech? Because I was listening to, Kemi Badenoch talking about non-crime hate incidents, we need to reform them. And I was sat there thinking, well, why don't we just abolish them? Let's just get rid of them. I've looked at Tony Blair's legacy, the use of, hate laws. We've had laws for decades to control things like direct calls for violence. Well, why don't we just get rid of these hate laws? I mean, is there actually now opening up an opportunity to do something quite fundamental in the arena of protecting free speech?
There really is, I think. And that's the important thing to do. It's not enough to say, get rid of this law, get rid of that law. We have to make a far more positive defense of freedom of speech. We've got such a proud history in this country of fighting for freedom of speech. The modern ideal of freedom of speech was essentially born in Britain. You know, you go back to John Milton in the 1640s or John Stuart Mill in the 1840s. These are people who defined the modern idea of freedom of speech, the liberty to utter, as John Milton called it, the right of people to think freely and to speak freely without being interfered with by the state. We've lost sight of that. And now we have JD Vance quite rightly telling us that Britain is no longer a free country. That should make us feel ashamed. We've got a proud liberal tradition, and resuscitating that is so important.
Well, indeed, and I completely agree with you on that. Thank you to Brendan ONeal, who has been consistent in calling out this erosion of our free speech. With me now to discuss this in a bit more depth is my panel, former Reform UK press spokesperson Gawain Towler and journalist and broadcaster Zoe Grunewald. Zoe, if I could begin with you. Boris Johnson is saying the UK is turning into a police state. What's your instant reaction to that?
I don't think so. I mean, some of the things you listed, Matt, I think, you know, there is a difference between free speech and freedom to, for example, incite racial hatred, which is what Lucy Connolly pled guilty to.
Alison Pearson didn't incite racial hatred.
No, but she wasn't charged for inciting racial hatred. She was visited under but that is how non-crime hate incidents work. They go there locked. She's not got a criminal conviction as a result of this.
Just person to person. I'm asking you a question. Person to person. Are you okay with police officers turning up at somebody's front door to log something against their record because they are perceived to have said something offensive?
If they're not charged with a crime, but it helps with police collecting data and being able to see if there is a likelihood of an incident of violence taking place, which is what they're for. They're supposed to stop incidents of hate metasizing into violence. Then I think are you reasonable.
You're okay.
I actually am. Yes, I am.
I'm okay. It's interesting. It's interesting. I'm fascinated, and the viewers will be fascinated too. Are you okay with 6 police officers arresting 2 parents for complaining about a local school in their WhatsApp
I don't
group?
know the specifics of that case, but if it, as you say, no, that sounds quite extreme. But I think the police should be able to collect data.
If I left this show tonight and somebody out there perceived that Matt Goodwin said something offensive and 2 police officers came to my house tonight and said, I'm sorry, Mr. Goodwin, we're going to record a non-crime hate incident against you, you'd be okay with that?
Well, it depends what you said. It depends on the context,
I'll give you an example. Maybe I say we should end all mass uncontrolled immigration.
Well, I think you do say those sort of things, don't you? Has anyone turned up at your door?
But would you...
No, obviously, but this is not... Look, it is relative. You said they can turn up without evidence. That's obviously not true.
That's true. You do not need to submit evidence for a non-crime hate incident.
But when they get there, they will then decide whether there is an incident to be logged. It doesn't... But you're not getting charged with anything, You're acting as if the police are coming and they're arresting people and they're climbing down and they're silencing them. That isn't the case. Okay. This is a way of the police being able to collect data so they can stop things.
Which by the way, they said they're not analysing.
On that very point, the police don't.
Oh no!
They literally don't.
I would make
130,000 cases of non-crime hate incidents in order, as you say, so they can plot in a sort of future crime sense who might go rogue in the future.
What about this?
And yet they don't actually do any work with the data, so the data is pointless.
But what about the
principle? The only thing that comes out of the process of non-crime hate incidents is the chilling of free speech. That is the only thing, because they don't do what it's for. If they did, there may be some justification for it. Personally, I don't think there is, but there may be, under their own terms. But they don't.
Gawain, let me ask you the same question that I asked Zoe. Has Boris gone too far in saying we are a police state, though?
I do not think we're a police state, but I do think that one of the great drivers for the dissatisfaction is a feeling of two-tier justice, of a feeling of unfairness. And what does two-tier justice actually mean? A feeling of unfairness. And that is when you have Councillor Ricky Jones calling for people to have their throats slashed, and he hasn't appeared in court yet, and Lucy Connolly is still banged up and not allowed to see her kids. Having apologised, no mitigation for the fact of the death of her own child, and that obviously the feeling for the parents of the children who were murdered in Southport. Nothing mitigating. And she is being held, I think, almost out of embarrassment.
Yeah.
embarrassment for how badly they behave.
Okay, well, thank you to my panel for now. They will try and chill some people's speech. Some of us will keep on going.